Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the University of Manchester Middle East Centre's online webinar on Entrepreneurship and Innovation with Professor Leigh Wharton. A bit more about our speaker today. Leigh Wharton is a visiting lecturer at Alliance Manchester Business School, lecturing and coordinating modules on the Global MBA program since 2010 and full-time program since 2002, specialising in entrepreneurship and innovation management. He is a serial entrepreneur, creating and directing a number of businesses, social enterprises and charities. His research doctoral thesis is on preparing early stage businesses for capital investment. He is also the current social enterprise ambassador for the Masood Enterprise Centre. So without further ado, thank you very much for being with us, Leigh, today, and over to you.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone, and welcome. I'm looking forward to our time together this evening, and my hopes are that we can spend the next hour together. We're going to have a series of slides and discussions lasting 45-50 minutes, but we'll have opportunities to ask questions. We'll have a question session halfway through and then one at the end. I'm hoping to use a mixture of real stories, some of my own exploits and from others as well, but also introduce you to the application of some theory. I want to introduce good practice and some of the latest thinking. So I will talk to you about quite a number of concepts and ideas, but very much with a practical bent so that they can be applied to your own personal circumstances, whether you consider yourself an entrepreneur or an innovator. We'll see where your thoughts lies. I know we've just had a little bit of an introduction to myself, so we'll only touch briefly on this slide. Yes, I've been involved with the Manchester Business School since 2001 and been running my own businesses since then. My main businesses are consultancies, where I tend to work with entrepreneurs and investors, both in high growth, high technology businesses and also in social enterprise and charities. Before that, my sector experience had been in mining and in manufacturing and in retailing, so I have a particular interest there. As William said, my recent doctoral thesis was in investment readiness, the preparation of early stage businesses to receive their first tranches of equity investment and the processes that entails. And I have one or two stories about that as well. So let's make a start. Start by just looking at some definitions. So what do I mean by entrepreneurship and an entrepreneur? Well, this is the willingness of individuals. It's about people. Business is about people, and entrepreneurs are individuals who look to create a new venture, a new business venture, and along the way to accept the risks that entails. We're in a view to making a profit. What you do with that profit is down to each of the enterprises themselves. So the high growth, high investment profits will be shared between the investors and the key stakeholders. It may be that if you have a social enterprise, then the profits are used in other ways. Innovation, a key aspect, a word that's used quite regularly nowadays. But what do I mean by innovation? Innovation, I feel, is an application of creativity, an application of creative thinking, of individuals, of teams, particularly of groups of people who come together to create a business or to create a new product or service around improving the situation that we find ourselves in. So this talk this evening will be around both entrepreneurship and innovation. And some of the concepts, some of the theories, some of the examples will overlap. But in broad terms, entrepreneurship is around the creation of new ventures, and innovation is around the application of creativity in new contexts. And throughout my work and throughout my teaching, I tend to come to this entrepreneurial life cycle. It's got three key elements to it, and indeed the sequence of these elements are fundamental in many ways when I'm speaking to inexperienced young entrepreneurs who are looking to make some of their first steps into business. But we'll use this five-stage model to take us through the rest of the talk this evening. So we start with business opportunities. And the first stage for any entrepreneur, I suggest, is that you look to identify opportunities to exploit or problems to solve. And in some broad sense, in broad terms, the majority of successful businesses start by identifying an opportunity or a problem to solve. The majority of failures I come across start with what seems to be a great idea. And the gap between a great idea and a successful business is huge. And many people come along with one idea that they're trying to get to market, and it's not always successful, and in many instances that's not the case. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you're looking to start a business, then my advice, and it's always the same when people come to me, many people come to me and say, I'd like to be an entrepreneur, but I'd like to run my own business, but I don't have an idea to deliver. And I actually reply by saying, well, that's excellent, because you're not looking for your idea to start with. What you need to start with and spend some of your time now is to look for problems to solve, look for opportunities to exploit before coming up with the ideas. So don't rush to look for ideas, look for problems, look for opportunities, and have a range of problems or opportunities in front of you before you start ever trying to come up with a business. So here we are again with another view of the innovation process, where at the start you're looking to understand any latent needs, and you're looking to understand them, understand what's required, and observe and find out about them before you start to turn those problems and look for solutions. So don't ever leap into the middle of this process by coming up with ideas to start with. Start by identifying the opportunity. Start by identifying the problem. And here we've got some of the lessons to remember. First of all, understand the problem before you start to design a solution. Understand the customers that you might have. Look at the problem through different frameworks, different perspectives. Make sure that if you identify a problem, you take the time to understand it and observe it well. And look at this through different perspectives. And this is where working with colleagues, working in groups, comes into effect. If you can have a diverse group of people looking at a particular problem or looking at an opportunity, they can observe it and understand it from different perspectives. So make sure you analyze opportunities, analyze problems through these different perspectives. And here we have an over 100 years old, this picture, this concept in front of us. And some people can look at it and they can see a rabbit. And some people look at it and immediately see a duck. And if you look carefully and quickly, you'll be able to see both. But this is really just an optical illusion being used as a metaphor for a problem. There's ways of looking at problems, opportunities through different perspectives. Sometimes it might well be a duck, other times it might well be a rabbit. So take your time to understand the opportunity. Take your time to understand the problem and observe and measure before you start coming up with solutions and ideas. Take your time in the early days before you come up with solutions to create your new venture. And here's an example taken from, this is an African example, this is MPesa. This was a business that was created 10-15 years ago in Kenya. It was a joint venture between Safaricom and Vodafone in those days. And MPesa was eventually created to solve the problem of banking and the lack of banking facilities in Kenya initially, but eventually it is now successfully moved to many other countries in Africa and in other parts of the world. But in those days, in the 2007, I think it was created. In that time, there were very few branches. The banking infrastructure in the open areas of Africa, of Kenya, were not serviced by financial institutions. And this was an opportunity to develop financial services without incurring the costs of branches and other expensive infrastructure such as ATMs. And the concept was around using mobile phones, fairly simple technology. It was SMS texting, where you could text information through the phone network, and Vodafone and Safaricom coming together, and utilizing existing retailing infrastructure. So it was M-Pesa agents who were established in existing convenience stores, petrol stations, dealerships, existing shops of various sorts. These M-Pesa agents facilitated the financial transactions using simple, straightforward mobile phone technology. And this is an example of identifying the problem, the lack of banking infrastructure, taking that as an opportunity to exploit, and coming up with technology-enabled solutions to allow it to start in Kenya, and now it's in many parts of Africa and other parts of the world as well. One of the concepts around innovation and innovative thinking is the idea of divergent and convergent thinking. And this is really quite a powerful, straightforward concept around generating many options initially, so thinking broadly, divergently. And before you come to one conclusion, you think broadly and then converge your thinking to a preferred option. So in the small diagram in front of you, it might well be that you're hoping to come up with an idea for a business. Well, you want to start by identifying many opportunities, many problems. Your divergent thinking initially will have you focusing on a number of problems, and then you want to select the preferred option to take forward, and where you then focus on one particular opportunity. And then you need to go through this divergent thinking again, come up with many solutions, not just one. And once you have many solutions in front of you, you can then converge your thinking down to a preferred option or a small number of solutions to the problem that may come together to form a business. So rather than trying to come up with one idea for a business, you start by identifying many problems. And some particular techniques I'm sure you've come across, many of you will have done, brainstorming, working in groups, doing a brainstorming exercise. That's a typical divergent process. Convergent process is something called new, useful, feasible, NUF technique. This is a ranking technique where you look at your different ideas and rank them against whether they're new. Have they been tried before? Are they useful? Does it solve the problem? Is it feasible? Can it be implemented? So it's a straightforward way for groups of people to consider many ideas and rank them against a set of criteria. And that starts with your convergent thinking. So your many ideas are reduced to a few. And a slightly more sophisticated piece of convergent thinking is the COCD box, looking at grouping your ideas against a 2x2 matrix here, looking at implementation from easy to impossible and normal ideas and original ideas. But here you can again group your ideas together, and it's a way of converging your thoughts from many options to a few. So the idea of divergent, convergent thinking is a powerful innovation tool that you should come across regularly. And once now you've been through the convergent thinking, you've got your idea. The second phase is ideation and testing of the entrepreneurial life cycle. So you have your idea, and this lean startup model, many of you will have heard of before. This is Eric Ries, and this is an iterative cycle around developing an idea. Oops, bear with me, that wasn't meant to happen. Developing an idea, and you're coming up with a prototype or a minimal viable product, or an example of what you think the final product or service could be. And you take that and you get it into the hands of your customers as quickly as possible, potential customers, and you see how those customers react. You measure their experience with your prototype or your MVP. And based on how your potential customers respond, then you look to either change, pivot, or you persevere with your idea as it is. And then you go through the cycle again. But the idea of the lean startup model is to ensure that you move quickly through the different stages. you test your ideas early with the customers, and then you move to change, if needed, your concept. And here's a couple of examples of different types of prototype. And here we have a physical prototype. This was an example of from Nokia. This is a Nokia phone in its early stages of design, where you're looking to see what the screen information could be, and the layout of the buttons and the like. And this is a physical prototype. Perhaps a minimal viable product in this case is the example of the software Dropbox. And when Dropbox first started out, their MVP was indeed a video. It wasn't a piece of software at all, and it was a video that demonstrated how the software could work, but it wasn't working software in any way. It was a video production of it, and the founders of Dropbox sent it out to their contacts and gleaned a response from their contacts. Would they be interested in the software if it could provide them with this type of service and this type of product? And the feedback was positive, which allowed them to go forward and get funding in order to develop the first versions of that software. You will have come across crowdfunding as well, and crowdfunding is often used as a way of testing customer reactions to products and services. And if you can get a successful crowdfunding initiative, then it tends to suggest that the product that you're offering in that crowdfunding service has a future and has an opportunity. Here we have design thinking from IDEO, Tim Brown. And again, this is a three-stage concept, but again, looking at identifying the problem or the opportunity first, the inspiration, then ideation, then coming up with ideas, and then implementation. So again, design thinking follows a similarly structured approach, and design thinking is a popular concept in many areas of retail. Just some more definitions of words that are used regularly at this time. So, disruptive technologies. Disruption. Many things are termed to be disruptive. Technologies are those technologies that can allow for a step change in efficiencies. So a distinct jump in the efficiency or sales of a product or service. So if you're introduced to a disruptive technology, then it's one that allows a significant step change in efficiency. And here we have a list, and it might well be that you take a little bit more time after this talk to look at this list in more detail. But these are a dozen areas of potentially disruptive technologies, looking at things like the Internet of Things, robotics, looking at 3D printing, advanced materials, maybe graphene as an example. But there are a range of technologies that allow, when implemented and applied, allows a step change in the efficiencies of the process or the products themselves. Disruptive innovation and these terms often get mixed and used in different ways. But disruptive innovation, in its pure definition, as written up by Clay Christensen, is an approach driven by new entrants into a market. It's not necessarily a technology-driven initiative, disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is when a new entrant comes into a market and looks to take market share from incumbent organizations by attacking those customers that have the least demands or a niche demand. And it enters the market by targeting these distinct customers and taking over market share in a small way. But then over time has the opportunity to develop its services and products, and eventually can offer those to the complete range of customers, from the least to the most demanding customers. So disruptive innovation is very much a market entry approach, and is not necessarily technology driven. So the example that I use, and certainly here in the UK, is a retail example. So in the UK, we've got long-standing retailers, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, and the like. And in recent years, the disruptive innovators are retailers that have come from continental Europe, Aldi and Lidl. And their service offering, from a retail perspective, has been something that the customers have taken notice of and moved their business to. So the new entrants, Aldi and Lidl, have taken market share away from the incumbents and have put pressure on the incumbent organizations to respond to that. Another example of a disruptive innovator would be Netflix. In its very early days, when it was coming to market, it provided a niche service to certain individuals who were not necessarily wanting the complete range of new films that were issued. They used at that time a new technology in DVDs and online sales, because their main competitor at the time was Blockbuster, and Blockbuster didn't respond to this new entrant with different technologies and different approach to the market. And over time, as history has shown, Netflix has moved from strength to strength in a range of ways, and Blockbuster is no longer with us as a high street retailer. So disruptive innovation is to be considered. And here's another form of innovation, and this is just a comparison really between a concept of closed innovation and open innovation. Open innovation is an approach particularly favoured by many pharmaceutical companies, where the research and development activity of the organisation has porous organisational boundaries, where open innovation encourages partnerships in the research projects, where the organisation may take ideas in from outside or move ideas into smaller partner organisations. And throughout the development of the projects, again, allows for movement between and across the organisational boundaries, as opposed to a closed innovation which tries to keep everything within the organisation. So it's just past. That's about halfway through the hour. So questions to date? Any questions so far on these first few stages of the entrepreneurial life cycle and any of the examples I've discussed?
We've got a couple of questions here, Leigh. The first one would be, what's the difference between creativity and innovation? Apologies, Leigh. I think we couldn't hear you there. Would you mind repeating that? I think your audio doesn't seem to be. If you could just mute yourself and unmute yourself, that could work. Unfortunately, we can't hear you, Leigh, at the moment. We still can't. I think the best thing to do would probably for you to re-enter the room, Leigh, to make sure that it works. Apologies, everyone, for that. We'll just get back to you in a couple of minutes once Leigh's audio works again. So please just stay on the line. We'll just get Leigh back online in just a second.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, we can hear you loud and clearly.
Good. Apologies, I'm not quite sure what happened there.
Not a problem.
Technology and all that. So yeah, so the difference between innovation and creativity. I see creativity as being the skill to create new options, to come up with ideas, to approach opportunities and find solutions. Innovation is very much taking those outputs and applying them in a practical way. So innovation is an applied skill about turning creative ideas into something practical and useful for society.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leigh. We've just got another one here. Do investors, PE, VCs, etc., look at an entrepreneurial idea, business model, or the people before deciding whether or not to invest?
They look at both. One of my investor colleagues has only one question he asks when people are pitching for his money, and that's what is the problem your idea is trying to solve. They look at the team, they look at the market, and they look at see if the idea, the solution, the business will solve a problem. What's the size of that problem? What's the size of that opportunity that it's looking to solve? But they do look at both. Though the majority of areas of question around finance, as you would expect with someone who's putting their own money into an investment. But there's 2 or 3 slides later on about business angels. I'll touch on them later.
Perfect. We've just got a couple of more. How can we apply innovation in our strategic planning in business?
I would look at your market, your competition. Innovation is very much driven by not only your internal capabilities, but what do your customers look for, and how does your business model deliver to the needs of your customers. And if I've not answered that particular question by the end of the talk, because I have quite a few ideas around that in the next few minutes, please come back and ask it again.
And we'll just have one more question. Regarding disruptive innovation, apart from crowdfunding, are there any other methods to assess the potential market demand for such ideas?
Not in terms of if you've got a product or a service you're wanting to test, then that's a piece of hard work. It's not easy. You need to find who you think your potential customers are, and quite literally get the product into the hands of the customer. So this lean startup concept, crowdfunding, as I said, is one, is able to do it. But if you have a subset of individuals who might be your target market, then I always try and consider where would those potential customers aggregate, and have I got a route to them through a third party? So if it's a customer base that might be elderly, could you use organizations that support the elderly? If it's a business to business service that you're providing, where do your potential customers congregate? Is there an industry body you can approach? And so trying to see where your potential customers aggregate, and then try and use a third party to get your product or service into that forum in some way.
Brilliant, thank you, Leigh. I think we'll just take one more and then carry on with the presentation. Yeah. How can a company activate its ecosystem smartly to better manage the innovation process?
That's a complex question. At least I've interpreted it as a complex question. Your own ecosystem. So hopefully you've got you have the capabilities of accessing your partners, your customers, and in order to understand how your internal innovation could occur, you need to, as we had earlier with the rabbit and the duck, is be able to look at your own organization from the perspectives of your wider stakeholder group. And if you can get a view or a vision of your own organization from the different perspectives of your stakeholders in your ecosystem, and then you may well see how your own organization needs to change, needs to innovate. And it's about understanding that you as an organization will be looked at in a range of ways depending on the where your stakeholders are within the ecosystem. So try and put yourselves into the shoes of your customers or your suppliers or your funders or your members of staff. They've all got a different perspective, and they all need, if you're looking to innovate how you perform, then they can all contribute into that. That would be a far-reaching exercise depending on the size of your own organization and the nature of the ecosystem in which you sit. Another key player in that ecosystem may well be government as well, local, regional, national. Again, they'll have a perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leigh. I believe we can carry on with the presentation.
Let's say if I haven't answered your questions, ask them again at the end. But we've got to bear with me. Let's try and get the presentation working again. Here we go. So, using this structure for our talk and our approach to creating a new venture, then the third stage is the business model generation. And business models and the concept of a business model is very popular at the moment. And one of the key thoughts around the business model is that your business model evolves over time. So you may start as a small micro business, but you'll look to grow into a large company. Now, as you establish your business model, your picture of the way that you work as an organization, then try and create one that is scalable from the start, so that this move between a startup to a large company, this transition that has to occur moving between stages of the business, becomes more manageable. Now, a business model itself is simply a representation of your organization and its activities. I typically use this business model canvas, and many of you may well have come across it. This is Osterwalder's version of a business model, where in its center you have its value proposition, i.e., what does your company provide that is of value to your customers? What do you do that allows the customer to buy your product or service? And how do you give them a benefit? It's got 9 segments in this particular version of a business model. 9 areas to look at from the structuring of your business. Its value proposition, you've got your customers, you've got the channels, the routes to market, and how the relationships are between you and your customers. And then it's got your revenues and revenue streams. It also considers the key activities you need to do to deliver your value proposition, along with the key resources needed for those activities. And then finally, what partners do you work with to enable your organization to be successful? And then costs. So this is one picture of how a business could be structured, a business model, and there are others. very quickly. There are 4 that come up regularly in discussion. So this is Johnson's model, and this has 4 elements to it. Again, looking at value proposition, looking at resources and processes, and looking at a profit formula, costs, revenues, and the like. Another business model, another picture, description of your organization, looks at things like markets. This is Chesborough's markets, again, value proposition, profit and costs, networks, your strategy. And it looks at it through 2 perspectives. It looks at it from a technical perspective, and it looks at it from a economic, financial perspective. You've got Osterwalder's 9-segment business model canvas, and finally you've got a 4th, less common, from Wege. This is very much just a list of key areas to look at, but again, it starts with what's the problem this time, the pain points, what's important to your stakeholders. Then the stakeholder value proposition. So perhaps widening your value proposition away from just the customer, profit formula, and then capabilities. So again, business models are a relatively new popular term, but it's really a pictorial representation of your organization, but can be used to focus on key aspects. There's been much talk about business model innovation with the introduction of technology-enabled businesses, so Uber, Airbnb, looking at Starbucks, looking at low-cost airlines. All of them have changed the business models of incumbent organizations. You've got the sharing economy, you've got networking effects now where you have portals with suppliers and customers, and the business is about managing the portal. Software as a service completely changed the nature of software, and transport as well is moving in that direction. Ownership, vehicle ownership, one-on-one ownership will reduce as transport as a service comes more and more into vogue. And here we have a guide onto how to, if you're a organization that's looking to innovate and looking to innovate its business model to apply creativity to the way that you do business, then these are the areas you want to be looking at your customer needs, looking at novel activities, looking at how your business activities are linked and who should do them, looking at different values for different stakeholders, and finally never forgetting the revenue models and cost models and profitabilities, and making sure that any new business model is complemented by a new revenue model. And again, this is a structure to help and assist organizations that are looking to change in response to new markets, new technologies, new entrants into their market space. They need to react. And here's an example, and in some of the courses that I'm involved in at the business school, we use this as a case study. This is Accor Hotels. So this is a traditional hotel chain who have to respond to the new entrant Airbnb, who is completely fundamentally changing the nature of the hotel industry. So Airbnb are the new entrant, and how does this traditional hotel chain react? Well, they went and reacted by better understanding their customers' experience. They had a customer experience map that took 7 stages in this particular instance, 7 steps to the engagement with their external customers. And they started right at the beginning of the customer experience with the customer when they were just thinking about holidaying potentially at one of their hotels, at the dream stage. Then they understood the challenges of the customers at the next stage, which was when they selected the hotel, and how could they be core hotels, how could they be at the forefront of that selection process. Booking, how could core hotels make the booking process more straightforward, easier to do. And in this instance, they produced a mobile device application to enable booking systems to be more easily accessible for their customers. Preparation, when you're going on holiday, could core hotels make it more fun to prepare for your holidays? Making sure that the 5th stage, the stay stage, was as quick and as painless as possible, checking in, checking out easily, and then a sharing exercise about your holiday, and then finally a return purchase, a return customer concept. So core hotels addressed their innovation to their business processes by better understanding their customer experience. And in this particular instance, it was a 7-stage experience. And it's about understanding your customers and the customer journey that's vital to help business model innovation. Here we have DBS, previously known as the Development Bank of Singapore, but DBS had a large innovation exercise, and they needed to better understand their customers through a customer journey map. And in this instance, their 4 stages were attract, interact, engage, and convert. They looked at the needs of the customers, they looked at their feelings, and they looked at the barriers that they had to overcome in order to improve the customer experience. And finally, on customers and customer journeys, here we have an interesting customer journey map where the organization had a 5-stage interaction: awareness, consideration, purchase, service, and loyalty. And you can see how that is similar to the core hotels in a range of ways. But here, this particular organization was looking at how they engage with the customers at various points in that journey, whether it was a physical engagement or whether it was a digital online engagement. And they were looking to work and improve both their physical touch points with the customers and their digital touch points, giving them opportunities to improve and innovate their business model based on their customer journey map. Technologies, most of which your improved business models will be technology enabled. Many new disruptive technologies coming through, as we spoke about earlier. And usually it's when these technologies are combined where they have an even more powerful effect. It might well be mobile technology, it might be big data, the Internet of Things, it might be cognitive technology, cloud computing, a range of robotics perhaps. All of these can be applied, and the technology enables new innovative business delivery. Just a couple of examples. We have AI here, artificial intelligence combining with robotics, looking at applications such as machine learning and computer vision, looking at robotics here. This is Kiva Systems, which was bought out by Amazon Robotics. And these are just snapshots, pictures of Amazon automated fulfillment services, be that workstations, be they automated picking and packing operations. So robotics enables improvements in operation within the distribution services of Amazon. And then you've got big data, the application of big data to enable your better understanding of your customers, and as a shorthand, the 4 V's of big data, looking at the volume, the amount of data that you can now access from a variety of different forms of data, and the speed at which you can manipulate and analyze that data, as well as you need to be certain that it's true, the veracity. So the risk to organizations where data can be either wrong or you don't trust the sources of that data, that make you make poor decisions on the quality of the data. So these are areas of consideration. But when you're looking to innovate, you're looking to do that with the use of new technologies. Moving towards the conclusion over the next few minutes. Stage 4 is resource acquisition, so people, finances, and the concept of effectuation. So this is another theory of how entrepreneurs create businesses. And entrepreneurs coming together can create a business by working within their means. So not always needing large investments to start with, but maybe working within the constraints of their capabilities and capacities as they currently have it. And the difference between causal and effectual reasoning. So on the right hand side here you have entrepreneurial thinking, effectuation, effectual thinking, where you have a fixed set of given characteristics, constraints, but from them you can have a range of different endpoints so that you can create businesses given a set of means. Whereas managerial thinking, causal thinking, you have your given means, a range of them, and you focus on a given goal. And so again, this is driven by having one given goal that you're trying to drive the different means towards. Whereas entrepreneurial, you can give your means, your fixed means, and you can have a range of options to think broadly and think creatively. Financing of a startup. This is just an observation that high growth businesses typically need venture capital, need risk finance in order to come to market. The thick line is some cumulative either profit or cash flow over time. And in order to be a successful business, you need to spend money in many instances. And this is where venture capital, risk finance comes in. As you're going through your research and development, through your product launch, through your commercialization phase, and before you're starting to have a successful product, and then latterly a successful business as your overall profitability more than breaks even. But in order to have that time, you need risk finance, you need venture capital. And one source of that for early stage businesses is business angels, individuals, high net worths, who would invest their own money directly into the business at an early stage. So these angels, these individual investors might come in before a venture capital or a private equity investment, and they're looking to promote and invest in early stage businesses. And what are these individuals looking for? Well, they're looking to invest in high return sectors that they know and understand. They're looking to have involvement and a relationship with the entrepreneurs, and they have a range of reasons for saying no for those investments. So from one of the earlier questions, what do investors and funds look for? Yes, they look at the team, they look at the valuation. So how well do you value your business? How many shares am I going to get for my investment, to be blunt? Size of the deal. They look at how realistic the business proposition is, and they look at the exit. How are they going to get their monies out? All of those are reasons for them saying no. Oh, sorry about that. And just rules of thumb, certainly here in the UK and in many parts of the world, they're looking for typically 40 to 50% annual rates of return on their investment. They're looking, this is really early stage, so they're looking to treble the money in 3 years or multiply it by 4 in 4 years, and so. So that's the types of expectation that investors have. And finally, just on this slide, the levels of equity that people are asked to give up. The rule of thirds is a good starter. A third of the equity for the idea, a third of the equity for the management, and a third for the money. And finally, management and execution, conscious of the time. Again, execution, it's about this transition. It's about establishing a scalable startup. It's about then growing the startup into a company, going through a number of stages. And one final point to make is the concept that many early stage startups are international from the start. 2 examples, one from my colleague who's based in Spain. He's set up an international business immediately called Unichemia, and he has interest in Central and South America, and it's a Spanish-speaking educational portal for learning programs, and this startup business is international from day one. As is this final example, a spin out from the University of Manchester, of which I'm on the board of, called High Solar, and it's a startup that is based on an academic who's interested in historic Islamic buildings, with her husband, who is an electronics engineer, and they've come up with lighting products for traditional Islamic buildings. Bottom right, you can see the external of a hammam, and in Fez, and the internal of a mosque. The products come from places such as Egypt for the lighting bulbs. The panel comes from China. So this startup has a international supply chain and an international marketplace. So when you're looking to grow your businesses, international options are immediately there. That's my set of slides. I'm conscious that I've overrun slightly, so apologies for that. But final questions. What do people? Where are people's interests based on that short talk?
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Leigh. That was very, very insightful. We've got a couple of questions here. The first one being, in light of COVID-19, is innovation a necessity for all businesses?
Yes, yeah, I think that's going to be a huge challenge. You've got customer behaviours that are changing. You've got whole swathes of industry that are going to be fundamentally changed. Retailing, for example, the hospitality sector. And so innovation and change will be prevalent in the coming weeks, months, years. And I would be suggesting that you look at the wider stakeholders. So just sheer trading behaviours will change because of government edict, but your customers as the key stakeholders in your organisation, and your staff will have requirements as well. So you must innovate.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Another one here. Many companies are very careful with their spending, of course, at the moment. So could you maybe give us a bit more idea in terms of how can they manage, you know, their innovation process, or how they would strategically invest their money at this time?
Okay. First of all, and those of you in business will understand this, the most important at this stage is cash flow. No matter what the size of your organisation, cash flow is vital. And I mean, I particularly work with early stage businesses, so that's even more impactful. But in terms of innovation and spend, it is a organisational decision to make. You need to reduce your costs, but the cost of not innovating could be terminal. So it's about making the judgment call on the amounts that you can afford sensibly to spend on changing the ways that you trade and the ways that your organisation runs, without fundamentally impacting on your long-term financial viability. There's not a simple response to that. It will depend on what sort of perhaps support can be provided. Here in the UK, there's a range of supports. But I would always caution around debt and taking debt products in if you're simply going to take debt to stand still. You're taking it in to change and improve the revenues, yes, good, but be careful on taking debt in simply to stay still.
Perfect. Thank you, Leigh. We've got one more here around how difficult will it be to attract funding for early stage businesses at the moment?
My suspicion is that the fundamental of, if you've got a really successful idea that meets the need of a large problem or exploits a large opportunity, you will get investment. I suspect, however, that the valuations will be reduced. So I suspect that you'll be getting less capital for your shares, or for the same amount of capital, you'll be needing to give away more equity. But the fundamental, if you've got a successful idea that meets the needs of a large population, then you will get investment. There's never enough good ideas to invest in, surprisingly. If you've got a good idea, there's always cash around. But I suspect that valuations will be impacted.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Leigh. I'm just conscious of time as well. I know it's 6:10 already, and many of you have given us your time already, so we're very thankful for that. So I think we'll just wrap up, if that's okay. And of course, for any remaining questions, I'm sure that Professor Leigh would be happy to answer some of your questions. So please feel free to maybe reach out if there's anything interesting you'd like to ask him. Apart from that, thank you very much for attending this webinar on entrepreneurship and innovation with Professor Leigh Wharton. It's been a pleasure having you. We hope you stay safe and have a very good weekend, and we look forward to having you for a future webinar as well in the near future. So thank you very much, Leigh, for this very insightful presentation as well, and a very good evening to you all.
Thank you. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Keep well and keep safe.
Thank you.